गणतंत्र दिवस की सर्वोत्तम शुभकामनाएं. As you have been intimated by us at Indology Foundation, today we have a great scholar, eminent scholar from BHU. You have always heard the voices of the voices coming from the JNU, but today you would hear a voice from the BHU. Honorable Speaker, Professor Aruna Sinha ji is a professor emeritus at BHU for the modern history, and not only she has been a great scholar, a great historian, but she has received numerous awards for her work in the field of Indian history. A Bharat Jyoti Award in 2012, Bharat Gaurav Samman 2014, Vidyut Parishad Award 2016, Gandhi Excellence Award 2017, and Achiever of the Subject Award in 2017 by the Confederation of Educational Excellence, New Delhi. She has been an honored member of the various in the various boards of directorates. She has also been honored by various governing board of editors and publications. She is on the board of American Biographical Institute and a distinguished and has a distinguished standing in so many organizations. So you have a dear audience. So you have an opportunity to hear a rare scholar of this period, particularly with respect to the modern history. So I have a great privilege to welcome Madam Professor Dr. Aruna Sinha ji to enlighten us on the topic topic of the day, that is Indian nationalism and Marxist ideology. So, with due respect to Professor Dr. Aruna Sinha ji, I request you to please enlighten us. Thank you, ma'am, for your precious time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And again, wishing you a very happy Republic Day. Let's begin and try to understand a little bit of history and history about Indian nationalism, history about Indian communism, and so on. Now, as I said earlier, that if we take into account after Marvick's observation that our lives are governed by what happened in the past, and our decisions are governed by what we think to have happened in the past. So that's where the role of history comes in. Now, again, it is just not enough to know history, but also to know history as it actually was. That is not the way, that is, it is cooked and processed and attractively served in many textbooks or the other motivated kind of writings. So basically, the context of today's presentation, what is important for us to understand is that what is the picture of Indian nationalism and what has been its nature and the language it has been using, how it is seen, and what kind of political terminology is being used to paint it. Now, alongside, it's also important for us that we know what communism is, what it stands for, what are its objectives, how it perceives the human societies of the past, particularly the Indian society. What are its methods through which it has realized its objectives down to this day, and how it subverts the positive nationalism in India. Now, here we take up the case of Indian nationalism first. We shall primarily talk about the Hindu society because historically, culturally, politically, India was a region, that belonged to the Hindus, that enshrined the ideals and cultures of a society, which for a very long time was addressed as Hindu, and their area as the land of Sanatan Dharma. Geographically, the region was called Jambu Dweep and followed up by what we like to say, the Bharat Khande or the Aryavar Desh. Obviously, we are referring to a country, which was called Bharatvarsh, not India. The India that we have inherited in 1947, which is truncated from all the sides, where its original inhabitants have been reduced to reside in an area even less than half of its original size. Here we mean whole of Jambu Dweep, a large landmass That included geographical locations, today falling under the sovereignty of almost 15 countries. That is, from that whole landmass, how different countries have been carved out in due course of time. Now, that's why, while taking a Sankalp month, it is very normal for Hindus to repeat Jambu Divya Bharat Khande and Aryavarteshe. Now, another feature of the Hindu society was that it was identified as a nation not because of any political reason, but because of its cultural affinities with the inhabitants spread over far and distant lands, you know, falling within the Jambudvip, Bharatkhand, without being a state in its present sense of the term. In modern times, we have had the state formation, and we have come to know about different, countries that have been carved out of the traditional territories. So we are talking about Bharatkhand, Jambudvip, as we used to address it. So, without being a state in its present sense of the term, further in this land, addressed as Aryavat, the practicing culture was primarily spiritual, and therefore, in every aspect, of life, this spirit of the spirituality pervaded in its social, economic, political outfit, and a sense of personal and social discipline was observable, which is why we had in our system unique institutions like we had Varnashram Dharma, caste system, and so on, and region, or you may say the religion that bound all these different organs of society together. That was called Hindu Dharma. Other subcommunities like Buddhism, Jainism, or Sikhs, they were all the offshoot of this mother community called Hindus. Now, let me tell you why it is most important for each of us to know about the history of Hindus. Because today in the world, that is the only surviving significant society which presents a continuity of cultural existence and functioning since time immemorial. Most other ancient societies known to the human world, they have suffered interruptions and traumatic transformation due to foreign invasions and forced conversions made by the latter day ideologies, like Christianity, Islam, communism. So most of the pre-Christian, uh, what you call pre-Islamic and pre-communist creations of these societies are now to be found only in the libraries and museums. And it's because of the hard labors of antiquarians, antiquarian scholars, that we have got a chance to at least know something about those as I said, pre-Christian or pre-Islamic or pre-communist societies. So please remember that Hinduism and its culture can meet the same fate, if there is no Hindu society to sustain it. It's not just a deception to say that, or you may say that it's a deception to say that Sanatan Dharma can never die because there is no Hindu society to sustain it. What happens? We can easily imagine. So, same is the case with Hindu art, Hindu architecture, dance, sculpture, literature, linguistics, and so on. So, in a word, the entire Hindu artistic and literary heritage, you might say. Now, the final extinction of Hindu society is also no longer an impossibility, because right here and now, this great society and its culture is besieged by the same dark and deadly forces which overpowered and obliterated so many of the old ancient societies throughout the world. So we can be very sure that if the Hindu society is also now, it is not alert, it stands in mortal danger as never before. And come to think of it, we have great historical narratives, accounts from foreign scholars, Greek, German, American, even British, like Max Fuller, William Woodruff, Annie Besant, even an empirist historian like Vincent Smith. They have given wonderful accounts of the Hindu society, and many more about, the wonder that was India. We use the phrase of our recent uh, famous historian, I'm forgetting his name. He was the vice chancellor of Australian University for some time, and so he has written a book, The Wonder That Was India. So I just refer to this, that revered culture throughout the civilized world, whose seers, sages, mystics, monks, scholars, scientists, missionaries, missionaries not in the sense of Christian missionaries or Islamic missionaries, but missionaries, merchants, took the message of universal harmony and peace to the farthest corners of the world. And history of 100 cultures and nations provides evidence of this holy heritage, in their religion and philosophies and literature, manners, and more. Now, the Hindus never overemphasized the necessity of a strong centralized state, like the ancient Rome or the ancient Iran, which would tyrannize its constituents or it will invade the neighboring countries. Never. To the best of my knowledge, there is no such record to prove it. And yet, their society was strong, steadfast, and a stupendous creation, as we would like to call it, based on a highly decentralized and yet cohesive social fabric made of organic units, such as the caste, that is what we call jati, the kul, that is gram, that is clan, sorry, the gram, that is village, the town, that is nigam, the metropolis, that is nagar, the janpad, that is country, and samraj, etc., that is empire. Now, this also meant that in Hindu India, the imperial systems rose and fell, but the infrastructure survived the test of time, remained vigorous and vibrant even till the recent times. Now, there are many Hindus who cherish the great spiritual traditions of Hinduism and its scriptures like Gita and Ramayana, but they do not cherish with an equal amount of enthusiasm, you know, the values of the Hindus. Now, a society which survived such lethal invaders who devastated so many ancient cultures of the world and defeated them in the final round should have come into its own colors after 1947, and it should have resumed a career of forging new cultural relations with each of them. But, sorry, the balance sheet of this struggle, or you might say sacrifice for freedom, had not turned out to be favorable to the Hindus. So, the primary reason being that former invaders have left their residues behind in the form of a psychological and intellectual force, which is now in alliance with powerful international forces, aided and abetted on a scale that, on an average, Hindu nationalists probably cannot match. And all these forces together have forged a united front, which is, if it's not too much to say, holding the Hindu society in a siege. Now, the names of these residues are what? Islamism, Christianism, communism, and Macaulaism, which not exactly a residue like communism. Now, we talk about, if you come to Christianism, Islamism, and Catholicism, they are the residues of, what you call the foreign impositions. But as far as the communism is concerned, it is not exactly a residue of any foreign invasion, but it is nevertheless a foreign imposition. So, and that too of a most malignant character. So, before we go into other details of what communism is, we clearly understood that the one point which has to be understood is that British government made substantial contribution to its growth. Normally, we have an impression that communism was anti-British and the British government was trying to tackle with all these communist leaders and putting them in jails and giving them a lot of suffering and things like that. But actually, it's not so. The British government was making substantial contribution to the growth of communism in India. In the 1930s, it encouraged the non-communist revolutionaries of India in the British jails, to read such kind of literature, which was banned by its own government and by its own orders for a normal person in India. You know, so as to wean them, now this literature was being made available to our revolutionaries who were jailed by the Britishers in order to wean them away from their anti-British passion. And it such kind of literature, after some time, provided that such a material that when they came out of the jail, they were convinced communists, or they were at least, if not convinced, they were indoctrinated communists, while still wearing the halo of what you call national heroes. So the ideological motivation of such revolutionaries, their love for the land, was now considerably diluted, in the sense that earlier they were saying Bharat Mata ki Jai, we love our nation, Vande Mataram, and such slogans were being used. So now they were saying what? Now they were saying Inqilab Zindabad. So I think this was a major achievement for both the parties, the Britishers as well as the communists. So now a few points about what is Marxism and what is communism. Now communism is an opponent of capitalism to begin with. It is an it is not an advocate of proletariat as it has always pretended. Then, like the Western system, it also believes in man being essentially a tool maker, a mechanic. Therefore, a centralized economy, or a fully industrialized society is the natural follow. In their economic scheme, in their planning, these are the natural follows, because their conception of basic human being remains the same as the Western capitalism. So it's not different from that capitalist approach. Marx, it is surprising, has choicest praises for capitalism, and he has choicest abuses for what he denounced as utopian socialism. Because the utopian socialism, we are using this word for Indian socialism, you know, and we may so right, we may call the socialism that is practiced in Hindu society. So utopian socialism, it opposed the concept of reducing a human being to a helpless entity. So Marx had choicest abuses for this kind of utopian socialism. They used to say it's a primitive communism. And what we are talking is not primitive communism, but what we are talking is actually the scientific socialism, the scientific communism. So Marxism has a basic dislike for free institutions, and therefore it has a dislike for Western capitalism as well. So on the one hand, it emanates from Western capitalism. On the other hand, it has a basic dislike for Western capitalism, because at least that society, has retained its few democratic, what you call institutions like parliamentary democracy, philosophical, what you call eclecticism, the political pluralism as expressed in its different institutions, the free press, the trade unions, and so on. As a result of this narrow approach, the communist societies, they have frozen the Marxist thought into a closed kind of orthodoxy. Now, Bertrand Russell, who has written a very famous book, and that is Why I'm Not a Christian. Now, there he explains, he says this Marxist ideology or the communist ideology, he calls it hearsay hunting. And what do we mean by this word hearsay hunting? That this practice, this closed system of orthodoxy, has reduced Marxism to the status of a Semitic creed like Christianity and Islam. It came to acquire all the characteristics, features of a Christian church, of pre-Renaissance Europe, becoming enemies of freedom, human freedom. It has no place for things like religion, culture, spirituality, goodness in human societies. These are unnatural defeatist instincts for them. In a nutshell, there is nothing like socialism in Marxist thought, except for a few Marxist trappings, in which Lenin disguised this whole game by using the words. We read the Marxist literature and we, come across expressions such as the forces of production, the history of class oppression, the class struggle, the classless society, the classless, communist society, dictatorship of proletariat, social economic equality, and so on. These are the normal expressions that these writers and these thinkers and these communists have been using in their literature. Now, please note that communism, despite its basic affinities with capitalism, did not derive itself from the West. Its gospel and guidance has emanated from an opposite direction, and that is the Soviet Union. The scholars and historians of this subject, they have who have documented and who have really studied the nature of communism and about communism, and created a lot of communist literature. They have, beyond a shadow of doubt, they have said that communism has been an instrument of Soviet foreign policy, to be very plain, in its drive towards world domination, particularly since Stalin emerged as its undisputed, leader in the Soviet Union and the world communist movement. Now, with unmasking of Stalin as a mass murderer by Khrushchev, the myth of Soviet Russia being a paradise for proletariat has been blown to pieces. Split with China also splintered the world communist monolith, but the communists have not lost their claims of self-righteousness. This is the basic point, that despite these disruptions, communism has retained its sense of self-righteousness. Now, obviously, then it is bound to come into conflict with forces of positive nationalism in every country. And India, of course, cannot be an exception. The Indian nationalism, which draws its strength from its own cultural heritage, social political tradition, it has its own views about the international events. It may or may not agree with the policies of Soviet Union or Soviet Russia in safeguarding its interests, pursuing its goals. Now, this basic dissonance between positive nationalism and communism came to the forefront during the Second World War, when the Communist Party of India made full use of the Congress Socialist Party, which allowed its platform for a time to be used by the Communist Party, because that was banned by the British government in India. So it pretended, this Communist Party pretended itself to be a revolutionary wing, in the eyes of Indian freedom fighters. But the curtain was suddenly raised. The actual nature of Communist Party of India suddenly came to the limelight when Hitler invaded Russia in 1941, and communists came out in their true colors. When Indian National Congress decided in August 1942 to launch the Quit India movement, this so-called Quit India resolution was put up in the AICC session of Bombay. Opposed, they opposed the Quit India movement resolution in the AICC session of Bombay and began to do the propaganda that the imperialist war had been transformed into a people's war, simply because the Russia was invaded. So till now they were talking about the British imperialist, the capitalist and so on. But now they started calling that war the People's War. So when Russia was invaded, it became a people's war for them, and they therefore decided to side up with the Britishers, and they began to move full steam in the opposite direction. Now the British, its former enemies, now became its friends. It was called the British bureaucracy. The Muslim League, that was formerly condemned as an organization of Latin interest, now became an organization to represent the Muslim interests. It became a spokesman of Muslim mass upsurge. Demand for Pakistan became a legitimate expression of Muslim nationalism, which the Indian National Congress should immediately concede. Now, this was their plea. And the rest of the story is too well known. We know that the Indian national movement now began to be branded by them as a movement in collaboration with the fascist forces. Subhash Chandra Bose was denounced as a Nazi dog and his Japanese rat. The communists were now spying, for British intelligence, and they were spying against who? The Congress Socialist Party and the Forward Bloc, who had organized the underground movement in favor of India. And some of the communists, some of the communist intellectuals, and you might say historians, began to prepare a solid case for creation of Pakistan, amassing facts, figures, academic arguments, and sentimental slogans. Now, CPI was hands in glove. Just a moment, please. Now, I'm sorry for this interruption. Now, what I was trying to tell you is that now the depiction of Indian national movement is quite clear. That how they are trying to portray, the people like Subhash Chandra Bose and people others that we just talked about. So they were using full use of Congress Socialist Party and the Forward Bloc. They were spying on them in favor of the Britishers now, and some of the communist intellectuals, you might say the historians, now they began to prepare a solid case for creation of Pakistan. They were amassing facts, their figures, the academic arguments, and creation of Pakistan. Because Russia was in search of a base now from which to operate for capturing India. Once the Britishers leave it. So most important for us to know uh, is that when the communists became frustrated because of the American intervention after the creation of Pakistan, America also began to take interest in the regional politics, and there were things like Cold War and things like that. So now they were thinking that uh, how to stop this kind of intervention and how to uh, enable Russia to take full advantage of the creation of Pakistan. And so they began to, in this projection of Indian nationalism, they began to condemn the forces of positive nationalism in India, who had fought with Muslim fanaticism tooth and nail for the partition of the country and for creation of Pakistan. So we see how the picture was reversed, that once they were calling Muslim League differently as an organization of landed interests. Now it is projecting Muslim League as representing Muslim interests, the Muslim mass upsurge, the exploited classes, and now it is saying that Hindus or the Indian National Congress and others, they are actually creating a ground for the creation of Pakistan and for what we call for alienating the Muslim society or the minorities. So now, for lack of time, of course, it's not possible, to go into very many details of communist politics in India before and even after independence. But most important for us now is to understand the following: The source of positive nationalism in India is Sanatana Dharma. Hindu society also provides a base for Sanatana Dharma. Muslim and Christian communities can contribute to positive nationalism only if they revise the premises of their extremist creeds in favor of universal principles of human existence as laid down in Hinduism. But are they prepared for it? Probably not yet. And will communism or its different organs let it happen? This is a big question mark. So, what is the future of traditional Hindu society or the positive nationals? Let's also identify, here the prime targets of communism. Now, first is the Sanatana Dharma itself, as it is enshrined in Hindu literature, and it is made living by a long line of saints, mystics, monks, and bhaktas. But it is ridiculed by leftist historians for its spiritual splendor in words, such as, like, they use the word when they describe this traditional society, they use the words that it's ridden with sterile superstition, obnoxious obscurantism, puerile priestcraft. Then the Hindu Dharma Shastras, they are denounced by them as depositories of, what do you call, prescriptions, primitive prescriptions that are primitive. Like they say primitive communism. So now they are calling all those prescriptions, they are primitive prescriptions. Degradation of women, Brahmin domination, lack of social responsibility, etc. Now different Hindu philosophies are condemned by them as Brahmin uh, conspiracies to suppress the Lokaya, which according to them is the only scientific philosophy pulsating with a revolutionary principle. Now they have invested Herculean efforts in destroying the annals of Hindu history and heroism. A whole battalion of communist historians have been busy for years trying to battle the walls of Hindu historiography, behind which they say that Hindu communalism and chauvinism is holding its ugly face. They ridicule every episode, every period, every precedence in which Hindus can take pride. All the examples which are glorious for Hindus, all the chapters of Indian past which are glorious for the Hindus, has been ridiculed by these communist historians and the communist writers. For example, the golden age of the imperial Guptas, again, that's a controversy. It has created a controversy now. So, this has been discussed by VC D.N. Jha, whose book on ancient India was reprinted by a publishing house owned by the communists. Now, likewise, personalities such as Shivaji, Maharana Pratap, Guru Gobind Singh are all as local rebels. They have been projected as local rebels. Now, Buddhism, as we know, has been projected as a reward against Hindus. We know that Romila Thapar and many other historians, they have, of the same persuasion. They have been saying that the description of beef eating amongst the ancient Aryans is also too well known. So the misdeeds of this, and then you see the misdeeds of Islamic marauders are also ignored, or they are balanced by mentioning their other activities, their other deeds as humanitarian, saying that Islam came to India with the message of brotherhood and social equality. So these are all the things that have been written in the books of history that are available to our students, for reading in the classroom. Maybe they are from universities, they are from colleges, they are in schools, but the same problem is there. So Jawaharlal Nehru was projected, as a big savior of India. Similar efforts are made by communist anthropologists, sociologists to break upon the Hindu social institutions, customs, codes, manners. and they highlight the role of class interest in each of these. So much now about the historical distortions created by them. Now, similarly, their methods to denigrate the votaries of Western nationalism are what? Double speak. That is, in their language, in the language of communism, the traitorous or the totalitarian forces are always presented as democratic. Their collaborators are presented as progressive. Islamic imperialists are, represented as secular, and those linked to positive nationalism, they are always projected as communal, chauvinist. So, if one is not careful, one can be easily trapped by their words. They are perpetually harping, on the conspiracy theory of society, which means that they keep digging up one conspiracy after the other, being hashed, by the majority community against the working class, peasantry, toiling masses, minorities, or the secularists of a very special brand. So Hindu society is a society that always hatches conspiracies against such kind of people. Now, in this scheme of you know uh, things, the communists, and please note all these words used here are quote unquote Hindu communalism, chauvinism. It is linked up with some capitalism, landlordism, forces of obscurantism, revivalism, reaction, and finally, all of them they merge into American imperialism. So, Hindu society is a tag to American imperialism in their expression. Now, the communists, therefore, calls upon the forces of democracy and progress, to rally around these communist movement to defeat this great conspiracy between American imperialism outside India and the Hindu reactionary forces inside. Now, for them, these are two faces of the same coin. Now, it's quite common for them to always make the propaganda that there is a conspiracy of Hindu communalists to kill Muslims, destroy their prosperity whenever Muslims show any signs of prosperity. Another method they use is, wielding a strong worded spherology, which they, hurl at their adversaries. For example, Mahatma Gandhi for them is what? He's called the cleverest bourgeois scoundrel. Subhash Chandra Bose was called a Japanese rat. Rabindranath Tagore is called a Magir Dalal, which means a pig. And Sardar Patel, he was called a fascist. Now, if ever caught, you know, for such a baseless kind of accusations, these communists have no shame in saying sorry publicly, and they would start doing chest beating over the entire scene. Now, so much about the methods that they indulge in to blacken their opponents. Hindu society, being basically a state society, dismisses them with a disdainful smile for such venomous outpourings. Probably it would have been possible for the Hindu nationalists to give it back to the communists if they were not enjoying so much of power and patronage and prestige in the post 1947 era in this country. But what a pity! Right? It is to say that much of their venom and negativity, is patterned by the widespread Macaulaysism prevalent in India. And to make matters worse, its main strength has been the Soviet finances, which pour into its coffers through several channels, in increasing amounts. Now, how do they use this foreign money? Perhaps this is not the place to identify the channels to which the Soviet money comes. But let's at least see. how they use this money to achieve their targets. They have built up a largest press in English as well as other, Indian languages, which run dailies, weeklies, fortnightlies, monthlies, and quarterlies, apart from the irregular periodicals. And they don't care for the commercial or other advertisements, which are normal uh, for any press to invite. And they don't, because it's necessary for their income. So naturally, these communist owned press, they incur a lot of loss, or lot, maybe in crores there are the loss every year. But they have largest numbers of what you call publishing houses who publish communist literature in the form of pamphlets presenting the party line. Now, since few decades back, they have also started publication of heavier actual fare, which carries with it the communist slant. The textbooks, particularly on Indian history, which are prescribed by the communist professors of the university colleges who are in control of university departments. And all this literature, light or heavy, is then it is then sold, at throwaway prices, which can't even meet a fraction of the cost of production through a chain of retailers who are allowed large discounts, who maintain a big, staff on salary at all levels. Now, this is a caste-based, this, this is a cadre-based movement, having a far-flung hierarchy of leaders and workers they are whole timers, they are part timers, some of them are paid staffs. The expenses on salaries, rents, food, transport, clothing, and sundries. That is all colossal. The movement also maintains many front organizations among the trade unions, women, peasantry, students, youth, children, artists, writers for peace, so called, for fighting imperialism, for opposing communalism, Hindu communalism, and the costs, involved in maintaining these transmission belts, as Lenin used to call them, it is enormous. Then the communist politics also involves organizing conferences, seminars, mass meetings, demonstrations, where a large number of people are called from long distances and they are paid for the travel, maintenance, to pass the party resolutions and shout the party slogans. In big cities, many of the participants are hired on the basis of per day payments and per head, and their lodging, boarding, transport is all paid to mobilize the crowd. Posters, placards, buntings abound. An obvious fact is how difficult it is to find financing, even for the normal expenses of a party that does not control the government. And here the expenses incurred by commerciants are abnormal. How they are or these expenses are met. But rest assured, one thing that never gets scarce in the communist politics is money. And that is why it's always in the position to make hollow claim, that it's a movement for the poor, of the poor, and by the poor. Remember, there was a cartoon long back, by Shankar, and their well-dressed upper-class communist worker is asking a bare-bodied beggar to make donation. But upon his refusal, he abused him for being a warmongering agent of American imperialism who will not part with his pesa. Now we shall see how the united front of hostile forces has come to harass and block the free blossoming of positive nationalism in independent India. These are particularly two: Islamism and communism. Now, this united front has been in existence since 1940s. We already see when we read Indian history. Now, when the CPI was openly, it came forward to support the demand of. It directed a large number of Muslims in support of Muslim League. It directed a large number of Muslims in support of Muslim League, Muslims, and cornered the what you call the other part of the Indian National Congress, with the help of few Hindu communists inside the Congress, they were cornered. So the game of Islamism was played freely with the help of the communist brigades. And Islamic forces returned this debt by encouraging, the Raskars of Hyderabad to help the communist resurrection in Telangana. Now, this close friendship between the two great, between Islamism and the what we call communism, it grew unabated after 1947, even though Islamism became a suspect in the public eye, but communism got its respectability restored with the death of Sardar Patel and eclipse of his following inside the Indian National Congress after Jawaharlal Nehru, or you may say under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, communism left no stone unturned to rehabilitate Islamism under the guise of progressivism. Aligarh Muslim University, which was a hotbed of separatism before partition. Now it became a hideout of, what you call such progressive Muslim professors, poets, writers, who had once thundered from the Muslim League. Now they flocked under Progressive Thinkers Association, Progressive Writers Association, and other communist fronts. Now another development saved the strike, and that was Arab nationalism. The Arab nationalism, when it started moving towards the Soviet Union in the international sphere. So inside India also, we find the Congress, the Indian National Congress, of course, as I have said earlier, after the death of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and the gradual eclipse of his following in the Indian National Congress. So, coming straight under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, you know, the Congress and other political parties in India, they, started parading for secularism, and they started booing Muslims in favor of Arabs and to isolate Pakistan in the community of Muslim nations. As usual, communism was in the vanguard. In all this game, communism was in the vanguard. Now, this friendship between the two achieved the first major victory in independent India when it successfully blocked the emergence of Hindi as a national language, which was already accepted in principle by the founding fathers of Indian Constitution. The communists brought forth their slogan that India is not a nation. It was a conglomeration of nationalities, each with its distinct language. The same argument that it had used in the 40s while justifying demand for Pakistan. Now, in its ardor for anti-Hindi crusades, the CPI uh, even turned out Rahul Saskatayan, who was one of the ardent followers. It turned him out from its ranks, because he advocated Hindi as a national language, despite his own faithfulness towards communism. And most important, Islamism immediately revived the lost cause of Urdu. Behind the smoke screen of this communist campaign against Hindi. And recognition of Urdu as a second language became a sine qua non of the kind of secularism which political parties had started to practice in India. Now, another front at which these two friends scored a victory was the subject of secularism itself. Both joined hands to jibe at the original Indian secularism till it lost its original nature or it was totally distorted and became a synonym for Islamic imperialism. For Indian nation, secularism was nothing new because of the fact of Hindu nationalism. So, no Hindu ever raised an objection to its acceptance as a state policy at any stage because for them it was something very natural. But once again, the CPI was active, very active in decrying this variety of secularism. You know how? By making the propaganda that Hindus occupied all power, prestige, and Muslim minority was denied its rightful place in national society. Then they were saying they started accusing figure. They started, by raising accusing figure at the president who performed Hindu religious rites inside the Rashtrapati Bhavan, or he visited Hindu places of pilgrimage. This secularism was a sham, they said. It was a shame. They were shouting. Now, Islamists were not slow to jump at this bandwagon by crying over their grievance of different kinds, particularly when Hindu communists were to give them out and out support. The Indian political parties were now warned by the Muslim vote banks that their claim to secularism is not sound until it championed the Muslim causes, both the domestic and international politics. The final upshot was demand of Muslims for reservation in every sphere of national life. Another field of their close cooperation where they achieved remarkable results was reinterpretation of Indian history, till it was emptied of all such content which nourishes a nation. It end resulted revival of all bogus kind of theories, advanced under what you call Macaulay system. And this sabotaged the soundest proposition that no community staying within the country be permitted to uh, go against what is called or should be called the positive nationalism. Now, what needs to be understood is that every society has its normal quota of social evils. Hindu society too may be having these social evils, and especially due to the fact that it has suffered a long spell of foreign rule. But it has sustained itself without losing its basic identity. It cannot be denied that Hindu society still remains a most humane society, cherishing its great spiritual, cultural, intellectual traditions, even today. And it is for the Hindu victim of Nicolaism to understand, at least now, that while he is acutely aware about the drawbacks of Hindu society, he is not equally aware, you know, of the Hindu doctrines that provide no sanction to those kind of evils. His tragedy is made doubly dangerous by his ignorance of the evils that are prevalent in non-Hindu societies, in which he has never lived as an insider. So what I'm saying is that for a average secular Hindu who calls himself secular, he always points at the evils prevalent in Hindu society. But at the same time, he is probably not aware with the evils which are prevalent in other societies, and because he has not lived there as an outsider. Now that's why a Hindu is easily taken in by Slavs' pretended belief in brotherhood, or Christianity talks about charity and love, and the communists claim about egalitarian society in Soviet Union. In all the three cases, it's a case of double speak. But the Hindus are easily taken in by all this double speak, because they are probably not aware with many of those things, because they have not lived there as an insider. Now, the united front among the ideologies hostile to Hinduism could be greatly weakened, if only the Nicolism prevalent among us withdraws its patronage and refuses to work as their transmission belt. Again, this is the word of planet. Now, nature of this united front is negative. We have to realize that India is secular because it is Hindu. India is a democracy also because it is Hindu. But if the Hindu society permits this, this kind of free for all and for any further, perhaps the days of secularism or democracy in this country may be numbered. Today, the whole world is looking to Indian philosophy and even leadership to save itself from, unprecedented crisis. Like let's take the crisis recently, which came by, COVID. And we have heard that in America, people are crazy about Ramayana, reading Ramayana. Now, this kind of dissonance, why it has come about? So, what the basic point is that the whole world now is looking towards Indian philosophy. And so, it is for the Hindu intelligentsia to understand that something is seriously wrong somewhere. It seems that the key to an understanding of this whole situation is to be found in the political parlance, which has been prevalent in India for more than 7 decades now, that is right after 1947, which has been parodied, for example, RSS, this is again quote unquote, as rightist, reactionary, revivalist movement of Hindu communalism, rightist, meaning the Hindus. It has been pillaring the Hindu society as a crowd of caste-ridden, cow-worshipping, superstitious primitives. Situation is not changing because the Indian society has never thought of even scrutinizing the birth of such words. Leave aside turning the tables on its adversaries. And the Hindu Macaulays have swallowed large doses of this kind of political parlance until they disgorge this poison. There is little hope for the nationalist society to survive with dignity amid the prevailing situation. Now, this rubbish political parlance has become petrified into a series of stereotype slogans, which most of the political parties are shouting back and forth. Use of the words such as leftist, rightist, progressive, reactionary, revolutionary, revivalist, socialist, capitalist, secular, communal, democratic, fascist. They are even though all these are dictionary words, they are not supported by the meanings actually provided to them by communism. Therefore, for deciphering, the communist language, one has to look into its real world. The source of that language has to be sought elsewhere, not in the dictionary. Now, since India saw the prime ministership of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru after 1947, and it has suffered his leadership for quite a few decades now, both uh, directly and you know indirectly. Let's wind up the discussion, by quoting verse of one of his contemporaries, who makes a beautiful observation saying, Pandit Nehru, who had been denied. Okay, I'll just read it out for you. That Pandit Nehru, who was, who was denied, uh, in a way, he was denied by his father. Uh, the childhood, what we call the childhood experience, or the experience which a child expects from his father, he was denied that kind of childhood. So, one scholar has made a very apt observation, and he says that his father wanted him to be educated on the most modern pattern from the West. He was in search of a fairy land. Pandit Nehru was in search of a fairy land. Communist propaganda informed him that such a fairy land existed in Soviet Russia, and he closed his eyes and went into a trance from which he never descended. Notwithstanding his psychopath's recurring reassurances that he has been maturing of late. That is the fairy land which Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was shown during his very brief visit to Soviet Russia. He indoctrinated, he swallowed it all in all. And his, near and dear ones were telling him that now it's time to get out of that kind of fairy land because Pandit Nehru is maturing of late. But probably he did not. You know, he he could not uh, believe in that, and he did not uh, did not make he did not uh, make any sense out of what was being observed by this kind of thing. Now, there's a person called Philip Strack. He was a Comintern agent. He came to India in the year 1926, to form the Communist Party of India. He compared Jawaharlal Nehru with a man called Fidel Castro of Cuba. Now he says that the figure in the world politics who resembles most Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was Fidel Castro, because he got into power on false pretenses, that is, as liberator, not as a communist. But within a year or even less, he liquidated all his opponents and built up the communist base so far that he was able to drop the mask. Now, Nehru also got into power on the same false pretense, that is, as a liberator, not as a communist. And he proceeded in the same direction, but far more cautiously, because he had succeeded Gandhi on the one hand and the legalistic British regime on the other hand. These two legacies combined to cramp his communist style to some extent. And it is perhaps because of this that his own countrymen, failed to uh, understand the direction in which Nehru's policies, both in the domestic and the international spheres, were leading the nation. So, all in all, the sum and substance of the whole uh, presentation is that the Indian nationalism, in its positive sense, has certain features, has certain traits, has certain characteristics, and vis-a-vis the Indian communism or the communist ideology, one has to understand it as an insider to appreciate and to understand the actual nature of these two ideologies and what are the basic features of the dissonance. So this is what I have spoken about. Thank you so much for your patient hearing and thank you very much.
Hello, audience. I think you have been here and enjoyed Honorable Professor Runa Sinha's talk today and understood clearly why and how Marxist ideology works against India as a nation and also the idea of India itself, the brand India. And I have to announce to let you know that YouTube has marked today's video talk uh, as a uh, restricted mode. So, this is how the Marxist ideology rules still the entire world. So they have gone out to restrict the video so that limited users, limited people can only watch it. We'll talk to YouTube management and the administration to make it available to the wider general. I wanted to add that, as it is said, uh, good people are known by the good friends. People are known by the good friends. Similarly, a professor, a scholar is known by the students. So this adage works very well with Ma'am Honorable Speaker Dr. Runa Sinha ji. She has prepared good number of students, highly scholar students. That is the great uh, that itself speaks great about Honorable Madam's contribution in education, particularly with respect to the modern history. So I would thanks. I would thank you, ma'am, for your precious time and enlightening us. We have been waiting for this kind lecture for so many months, and today it has been possible. And we look forward to have another talk pretty soon from you. I am sorry for technical glitches that we have faced, but we have learned from the experience. Next time we would plan it better, and the part which has not gone well in the beginning, that would be removed from the overall video so that quality remains good, and our Indian gentry can keep getting educated with your great talk. It was very sad to know that Marxist strategies called our great leaders by the name, as you have explained. It was even not known to me. Subhash Chandra Bose, Gandhi ji, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, they spared nobody. Any great leader which who they thought may not shoot to their narrative, so they started calling by name. It is very bad on their part, uncalled for situation, uncalled for thing, but they have done it. So definitely, your talk would educate our audience as well as the students, also the journalists. In none of the communist countries, democracy works well. It is only in India, and uh, wherever in the world, in the countries, communism has not come up in a majority states, or it's not a good power. They demand democracy, and once they get the catch hold of the things, then the entire democracy goes for a toss. That is the situation. So again, I thank you, ma'am, for your precious time, and pretty soon we would come back to you with a request for making another lecture of yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.